Welcome to the extended play version of the Introduction to the Arcane Art of Placket Making. I'm making sleeve plackets, which are there to allow the split for opening the cuff to be somewhere other than on the seam, which I do on shirts to allow the fancy buttons to be shown off here instead of hidden around here. Also because a placket just looks badass and cool and impressive, and I like glory. Plackets are useful in other contexts as well, so you can apply this to neck openings, broad fall waist fastenings, anywhere you need to add a slit and have it not be a raw edge. This version does not have buttons or buttonholes on the actual placket, but there's no reason that you should not put them on a placket if that's what your design calls for. Maybe add some interfacing if you're planning to do that. This example is going on a pair of sleeves, so you can follow these instructions for one side and then mirror everything on the other side. The shape I use is this, and it's crazy pants at first glance that this is going to result in this after a bit of folding and stitching. Witchcraft. But you are going to learn this dark art and use it for good and not evil. The shape, unsurprisingly, is not arbitrary. It's made up of a bunch of measurements based on where it's going to fold and what each bit is going to cover. I'll break all that down after we've looked at sewing it on so you have some idea what I'm talking about. To make a sleeve placket that is going to go here, lay the sleeve wrong side up and lay the placket also wrong side up like this. So the bottom edges line up and the pointy bit is somewhere near the middle. Where you place them obviously dictates where the opening will be, and specifically where this cut line ends up, that will be the opening. My placement will put them on the outside of the sleeve when you hold your arm like this, but you can fine tune it. The pattern has some stitching lines on it, which you can transfer to your fabric however you want. I just put a mark or a scissor clip at the bottom edge and do the rest by eye because I'm slapdash. Sew up to tiny seam allowance from the top, over and down along these lines, and then use sharp scissors to clip a line up the middle, not quite to the top, and into the corners without clipping through the stitching, but get as far into the corners as you can. You can now sort of invert the whole thing through that cut and flip the sleeve over so you're looking at the right side of both sleeve and placket, with the sewn lines neatly enclosed in a 1 centimeter gap. You might want to press it at this point to keep it from fighting you too hard. What we're going to do now is use the narrower side to enclose and bind this side of the cut, and the wider side to enclose and bind this side of the cut, as well as to cover all the messy bits above the cut. So to break that down into something you can actually follow, take the narrow side, pull it open like a book so that you can see the tiny seam allowance edges, which you should also flip that way. Fold back a tiny 5mm fold under on the edge, and fold that edge to meet the stitching line. Top stitch it down all along that edge so it's enclosing and binding that side of the cut. Don't worry about the top raw edges, we'll get to that. Now, lay the wider side with the pointy bit over similarly, along with the seam allowance edge. Again, fold over a tiny edge, and then fold that edge to meet the stitching line. Top stitch along that edge from the bottom, and as you get towards the pointy bit, fold under the little edges on all sides. This is absolutely as fiddly as it gets, folks. You can fold and pin and press all the little tiny edges before you start if that makes it easier, but be prepared for this to be a little bit of a nightmare the first time. If you have the patience, maybe make a double-size mock-up first. It'll be a lot easier to handle at bigger scale if you're just getting your head around it. Anyway, sew around the pointy perimeter and as far down as the top of the gap. You can feel in there it's a little bit of a lumpy bit. Turn on the needle and sew across to the first seam to enclose that lump. All this was awkward as hell, I know, especially the bit where you try to tuck under the edges of the pointy bit. It will absolutely not go perfectly the first time you do it, so maybe try it with some waste fabric the first few times just to get the knack of it. So as promised, here's the shape and a breakdown of the measurements involved in case you want to draft your own at whatever scale or increase the tiny seam allowance, like if you're using a rougher fabric that frays in big chunks. Start at the cut, which is as long as you want the opening to be on the finished garment. Decide how much tiny fold-over seam allowance you want and draw a stitching line that distance either side and also above the cut line, and extend the cut line at the top into the corners. On the narrow side, decide how wide you want your binding strip. Usually I go with the same width as between the stitching lines, but it doesn't really matter. You need twice that width because you'll be folding it over, plus the extra strip for seam allowance. On the other side, the protocol is similar, but you want to make it a little wider so it covers everything else when it's folded over. Mine is something like twice as wide as the stitched area, plus that again for folding over, plus seam allowance. This flat top line is just above the top of the stitching box. I give it about seam allowance width again, but it's kind of arbitrary. It doesn't get folded in, it just sits there under the top layer. The top triangular bit rises out of the far half of the big side by as much extra height as is needed to enclose everything and any additional height you fancy for style reasons. And that pointy bit has foldy under seam allowance on all sides, including here, though that bit kind of automatically gets folded in when you fold it closed. And the pointy bit at the top is pointy for looks. You can make it any shape you want, but pointy does turn out to be the easiest shape to make neat in the end. So that's a placket. It's fiddly and a bit complicated, but like actual witchcraft, it's not truly supernatural. So hopefully now you get how it works and you can go stick plackets on all your projects.